The grand ballroom shimmered under the golden chandeliers, their glow reflecting off the crystal glasses raised in a toast. The air smelled of wealth, expensive cologne, fresh roses, and aged wine poured for guests dressed in their finest attire. An extravagant wedding was taking place, one that had been the talk of the city for weeks. An Arab millionaire, a man of immense wealth and influence, had just married a much younger woman, stunning and mysterious. Whispers floated through the crowd. Some called her lucky, others suspected she was after his fortune. But none of it mattered now. The papers were signed, the vows exchanged. They were husband and wife. Yet, despite the smiles, something felt off. The millionaire sat at the head table, his hand wrapped around a glass of champagne. He wasn't celebrating. His eyes, dark and unreadable, scanned the room as if searching for something. He leaned toward his bride and whispered something in her ear. Her face turned pale. Whatever he had said made her grip the tablecloth, her nails digging into the fine fabric. An hour later, he excused himself. The wife watched him leave, her lips pressed into a thin line. The guests were still laughing, dancing, drinking, unaware that this night would soon take a dark turn. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the enormous windows of the millionaire's private chamber, casting long shadows over the silk sheets of the massive bed. But something was wrong. A maid knocked once. No answer. She knocked again, then hesitated before slowly pushing the door open. A gasp escaped her lips. The millionaire lay motionless on the bed, his face unusually pale, his body unnaturally still. His hand was curled loosely near his chest, as if he had tried to grab something before his last breath. The air in the room was heavy, as if death itself still lingered there. By the time the police arrived, the entire mansion was in chaos. Servants whispered behind closed doors, guests who had stayed overnight were questioned, and the new bride, his wife of less than 24 hours, sat at the edge of their bed, staring blankly at his lifeless body. No tears. No visible shock. Just silence. The detectives exchanged glances. Something wasn't right. The detectives exchanged glances. Something wasn't right. The lead investigator, an older man with years of experience, leaned forward and asked the one question everyone in the room wanted to know. What really happened last night? The wife blinked, her lips parted as if to speak. But then she hesitated. A long pause. And then, she finally answered. I don't know. He was fine when we went to bed. The room fell into a heavy silence. But even before the police could finish processing the scene, a new, chilling twist emerged, one that would leave the entire world stunned. The whispers spread like wildfire. News of the millionaire's sudden death reached every corner of the city, making headlines within hours. The media swarmed the mansion, desperate for a statement. Was it a tragic accident? A heart attack? Or something far more sinister? Inside the estate, the investigation had already begun. The lead detective stood at the foot of the massive bed, his gaze locked on the lifeless form of the millionaire. His expression remained neutral, but inside, his instincts screamed. Something wasn't adding up. Any signs of forced entry? He asked. A junior officer shook his head. None. The security system was active all night. No unusual movements detected. The detective glanced at the wife. She sat on a velvet chair near the window, wrapped in a silk robe. Her face was calm, too calm for a woman who had just lost her husband. You said he was fine when you went to bed, the detective repeated, his eyes narrowing. Did he mention anything unusual? Any discomfort? The wife hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, no. He was tired. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. The detective caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Before he could press further, the coroner entered the room. His expression was unreadable, but the way he held the preliminary autopsy report suggested something deeply troubling. The cause of death, the coroner said carefully, is unclear. A murmur ran through the room. Unclear, the detective echoed. What does that mean? The coroner exhaled. There are no visible injuries, no signs of struggle. His body shows no obvious indications of poisoning. But his heart stopped in a way that doesn't make sense. The detective's jaw tightened. Explain. The coroner flipped through his notes. It wasn't a heart attack. There's no damage to the arteries. No clots. It's as if something made his heart stop instantly, without warning. Silence. The detective turned back to the wife. When was the last time he saw a doctor? She looked up, her expression blank. He was perfectly healthy. That answer sent chills through the room. Strange clues begin to emerge. While the authorities worked, a team of security officers reviewed the surveillance footage from the mansion. Every hallway, every entry point, every room with access to the millionaire's chamber. Hours of footage played. Nothing unusual. Then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the cameras glitched. For exactly 63 seconds, the screen went black. When it returned, nothing seemed out of place, except one thing. The door to the millionaire's room, which had been closed all night, was slightly ajar. Someone had been there. The wife under suspicion. By the time the wife emerged from her room, she was no longer just a grieving widow. She was a suspect. The detective found her in the grand living room, staring at the enormous portrait of her late husband hanging above the fireplace. "We need to ask you more questions," he said, his voice firm. She turned slowly. "I've already told you everything." "Not quite." He stepped closer. "Your husband left behind an empire worth billions. You were the only person with him that night. And now, there's evidence that someone entered the room when the cameras blacked out." A long silence. Then, she did something that made the detective's skin crawl. She smiled. It was small, barely there. But it was enough. "I had nothing to do with his death," she said, her voice almost playful. "But you already knew that, didn't you?" The detective stiffened. "What do you mean?" She walked past him, trailing her fingers along the marble table. "You think this is about money, don't you?" She turned to face him. "You're looking in the wrong direction." The detective clenched his jaw. "Then help me look in the right one." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My husband didn't die because of me. He died because of what he knew." Before the detective could respond, a butler rushed into the room, his face pale as a sheet. "Sir, the will. It's being read in an hour." For the first time, the wife looked nervous. And that was the moment the detective realized. Whatever was in that will, it was going to change everything. The atmosphere in the millionaire's study was suffocating. Heavy wooden shelves lined with ancient books, a massive desk that had once belonged to the most powerful man in the city, now abandoned. A group of people sat in tense silence. The millionaire's closest associates, lawyers, family members, and his new wife. She sat near the center, her hands resting delicately in her lap. Unlike the others, she showed no fear, no anticipation. But there was something in her eyes, a guarded look, as if she already knew what was coming. The lawyer cleared his throat, unfolding the document in front of him. The words that followed would change everything. The will's shocking revelation. "I, being of sound mind, hereby declare my final will and testament." Every breath in the room hitched as the reading began. The expected names appeared, the millionaire's business partners, his charitable foundations, and distant relatives. Small assets were distributed among them. But then, the lawyer paused. His fingers tightened around the paper, and he read the next part with caution. To my wife, I leave. Silence. Everyone leaned forward, waiting for the inevitable, the moment she inherited the fortune, the estates, the empire. But then. Nothing. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The wife's expression remained frozen, but her grip on the chair tightened. Gasps filled the room. A businessman muttered under his breath. Someone stifled a chuckle. The lawyer cleared his throat again. There is another clause. All eyes turned back to him. The wife's knuckles turned white. The lawyer continued. Instead of my wife, I leave my entire estate to. A name was mentioned. A mysterious beneficiary. Someone no one had ever heard of. The mystery deepens. The wife finally spoke, her voice smooth but sharp. That's impossible. The lawyer hesitated. The document is legitimate. Then read it again. The lawyer swallowed. It clearly states that all financial assets, properties, and business holdings now belong to. But before he could finish, the doors burst open. A man in a dark suit stepped inside. He wasn't part of the legal team. He wasn't family. He wasn't supposed to be there. The detective stood up immediately, his instinct screaming. Who are you? He demanded. The man's cold gaze landed on the wife. You already know who I am, he said. And you know why I'm here. For the first time, she looked afraid. Secrets begin to surface. The detective cut in. You have no authority here. This is a private legal proceeding. The man ignored him, stepping closer to the table. He pulled a sealed envelope from his coat and tossed it onto the desk. The wife stared at it, unmoving. The lawyer picked it up, his hands trembling as he unfolded the contents. He scanned the words, his face slowly losing color. This. He swallowed. This was not part of the original will. The detective stepped forward, peering over his shoulder. The paper wasn't just a legal document. It was a confession. Written by the millionaire himself, dated exactly 3 days before his death. If you are reading this, then I am already dead. And my wife is not who she claims to be. The wife shot to her feet. This is a forgery. The detective's gaze burned into her. Is it? She hesitated. A moment too long. The man in the dark suit smirked. I think we all know the truth now. The wife's lips pressed together, but before anyone could demand more answers. The lights flickered. A loud crash echoed from outside the room. And then. A blood-curdling scream. Something bigger than money. The detective's gun was out in seconds, his instincts razor-sharp. The others backed away from the doors, the tension suffocating. Another scream. This time, from the main hall. The wife, still standing, looked visibly shaken. The man in the dark suit watched her closely. This isn't about the will anymore, is it? She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered something under her breath. A single phrase. The detective barely caught it. And what he heard made his blood run cold. They finally found me. The wife turned and bolted, rushing toward the nearest exit. Stop her, the detective shouted. But it was too late. She was gone. And somewhere deep inside the mansion, someone else was waiting. Someone who wasn't supposed to be alive. The room erupted into chaos. The detective bolted toward the door, his pulse pounding in his ears. The wife had vanished in seconds, slipping through the crowd like a shadow. Seal the exits, he barked at the officers standing near the hall. She doesn't leave this mansion. The lawyer, still gripping the mysterious letter, looked visibly shaken. This is absurd. Who wrote this? How could he have known? But no one was listening. The mysterious man in the dark suit was already moving, stepping away from the stunned onlookers and heading toward the grand hallway. His posture was too relaxed, like a man who already knew what was coming next. The detective caught up to him, grabbing his arm. "Not so fast. Who are you, and what do you know about this?" The man smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "I know," he said quietly, "that this isn't about inheritance. It never was." Before the detective could press him further, a gunshot rang through the mansion. A deadly chase. The detective whirled toward the sound. It had come from the upper floors. A second shot followed, then the distant sound of a struggle. "Upstairs," he shouted, taking the stairs two at a time. The wife had gone this way, he was sure of it. At the top of the staircase, the hall stretched in both directions. Ornate doors stood closed, hiding secrets behind every frame. Then, movement. A shadow slipped through a door at the far end, disappearing into the master bedroom. The detective sprinted. Gun drawn. Heart racing. He kicked the door open. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn. The bed, where the millionaire had been found, still unmade, untouched since his death. But the room was not empty. Near the dresser, the wife stood frozen, her hand clenched around something. A gun. She wasn't alone. Opposite her stood another figure, a man in a security uniform, holding a weapon of his own. His face was twisted in anger, his grip trembling. "Give it to me," he growled. The detective took a slow step forward. "Put the gun down," he said, his voice calm but firm. The wife's grip on the weapon tightened. "I don't have it," she said, her voice sharp. "I don't know what you're talking about." The security guard shook his head. "Liar." His finger twitched over the trigger. The detective acted in a second, raising his own gun. "Drop it, now." But the wife moved first. In a single breath, she lunged toward the fireplace, reaching into the ornate stone carving above it. Something clicked. The entire wall shifted. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small metal box. And for the first time, true fear flashed in her eyes. The security guard cursed and fired. The secret no one was supposed to find. The detective lunged, tackling the wife to the ground as the bullet tore through the air above her head. The shot shattered a mirror, sending shards flying. The wife gasped, clutching her shoulder, not hit, but shaken. The security guard rushed forward, reaching for the box hidden in the wall. But before he could grab it, the mysterious man in the dark suit appeared behind him. A single, swift movement. And the security guard collapsed, unconscious. The detective stared. "What the?" The man in the dark suit knelt, lifting the small metal box from its hiding place. He turned it over in his hands, inspecting it. The wife sat up, her breath ragged. "That's mine," she said sharply. The man chuckled. "I don't think so." The detective was done playing games. He turned his gun toward the suited man. "Enough. Open it. Now." For a moment, the man simply smiled. Then, slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside, there were no diamonds, no money, no property deeds. Just a single USB drive. The detective frowned. "What's on it?" The wife looked away. The man in the suit turned the device between his fingers. "The reason your millionaire died. The truth is more dangerous than they thought." The wife exhaled, finally breaking her silence. He found out something he wasn't supposed to. Something powerful people would kill to protect. The detective's grip on his gun tightened. "Start talking." The wife glanced at the unconscious security guard. "That man wasn't protecting this house. He was sent here to retrieve this drive before I could." "By who?" She swallowed. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then, her next words sent a chill through the air. My husband didn't just run businesses. He ran secrets. And one of them got him killed. The detective took a step closer. What's on that drive? The wife hesitated, then, finally, she whispered. Proof that his death wasn't an accident. The detective's stomach dropped. You mean? Yes. She met his gaze. Someone murdered him. Silence filled the room. And then, outside the mansion, tires screeched to a halt. A convoy of black SUVs had arrived. They weren't police. And they weren't here to talk. The detective's pulse spiked as he heard the screech of tires outside the mansion. He knew those weren't standard police vehicles. The wife turned pale, her gaze flickering toward the window. They found us, she whispered. The man in the dark suit remained eerily calm, rolling the USB drive between his fingers. That didn't take long, he murmured. The detective gritted his teeth. Who are they? The wife swallowed hard. People who don't leave loose ends. Without another word, she rushed toward the fireplace, grabbing a small hidden revolver tucked behind a shelf. The detective didn't stop her. This was no longer about an inheritance battle. This was a fight for survival. The mansion turns into a battleground. From the second-floor window, the detective caught a glimpse of the black SUVs lined up outside, engines rumbling. Armed men in dark suits poured out, moving with silent precision. Not cops, he muttered. Not even close, the wife replied. They work for people my husband tried to expose. The detective had seen enough of the world to recognize mercenaries when he saw them. The leader, a tall, bald man with a scar along his jaw, signaled his men. Within seconds, they split into teams. Some headed for the main entrance, others flanked the side doors. They're surrounding us, the detective growled. The man in the dark suit slipped the USB drive into his pocket. That means we have something they need. Correction, the detective snapped, loading his weapon. That means they're going to kill us for it. The wife took a deep breath. Then we don't let them have it. The first shot is fired. A loud crash shattered the air, the front doors burst open. Armed men stormed in, moving like shadows, their silenced weapons raised. The detective grabbed the wife, pulling her behind cover just as the first round of bullets ripped through the furniture. The mansion erupted into chaos. The man in the dark suit vanished into the hallway, moving fast. The wife cursed under her breath, firing a quick shot toward the attackers before ducking behind a marble column. The detective returned fire, taking down one of the intruders. But more kept coming. A bullet grazed his shoulder, sending a sharp sting through his arm. He hissed in pain, but there was no time to stop. Second floor, the wife shouted. We have to get upstairs. That's a dead end, the detective snapped. She shook her head. Not if you know this house like I do. They moved fast, dodging another hail of bullets. The detective took down another attacker before sprinting up the grand staircase. Halfway up, he caught a glimpse of the security guard, the one who had tried to kill them earlier. He was lying still, blood pooling around him. Dead. But not from a bullet wound. His throat had been slit. The detective's blood ran cold. They're cleaning up their own mess, the wife muttered, following his gaze. They're not just here for us. They're erasing everything. A desperate escape. They reached the second-floor corridor, ducking into a side hallway. The wife pressed against the wall, feeling for something. Hurry, the detective urged. They're coming up. Got it, she hissed, pushing open a hidden panel behind an old bookcase. Behind it, a narrow escape tunnel. The detective's jaw tightened. You had a secret passage this whole time? My husband did, she corrected. I just knew where to find it. They slipped inside, sealing the panel behind them just as footsteps thundered up the stairs. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, boom! A massive explosion rocked the mansion, shaking the very foundation. Smoke and flames billowed through the halls. They're burning it down, the detective realized, his stomach twisting. The wife grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. Then we need to get out before we go down with it. The USB drive holds the key. The passageway led to an underground tunnel, dark and damp. As they ran, the detective turned to the wife. Tell me what's on that drive. She hesitated. Then, finally, she spoke. My husband wasn't just a businessman, she admitted. He had information on some of the most powerful people in the world. Corrupt politicians. Secret deals. Murders made to look like accidents. And his death, the detective pressed. She exhaled. It wasn't random. He found out something too big, something they couldn't risk him revealing. The detective's mind raced. What exactly did he know? The wife met his gaze. The truth about their biggest secret. Before the detective could ask more, a loud noise echoed behind them. Footsteps. They weren't alone in the tunnel. Someone was following them. And this time, they weren't going to miss. The tunnel stretched into darkness, the only sound their hurried footsteps echoing off the damp stone walls. The detective's breath came sharp and fast, his pulse hammering in his ears. But so did another sound. Footsteps. Not theirs. Someone was following them. The wife turned her head slightly, her expression tense. They're close. The detective clenched his jaw. He couldn't see them yet, but he felt their presence. Whoever they were trained, moving with the silent precision of men who had done this before. And then, the first gunshot echoed down the tunnel. The bullet slammed into the stone wall inches from the wife's head. She ducked instinctively, pressing against the tunnel's side. The detective fired back blindly, buying them seconds to keep running. We can't outrun them forever, he shouted. The man in the dark suit, who had disappeared earlier, suddenly reappeared ahead of them, standing beside a rusted metal door. This way, he barked. The detective didn't trust him. Not fully. But he didn't have any other options. Grabbing the wife's wrist, he dragged her forward, bullets whizzing past them as they sprinted for the exit. The man in the suit yanked open the door, ushering them inside. The second they crossed through, he slammed it shut behind them. The sound of gunfire echoed as bullets pounded against the metal. For now, they were safe. But not for long. The secret bunker. The detective took a moment to catch his breath, glancing around. They were in an underground storage room, filled with old wooden crates and rusted equipment. The wife straightened, brushing dust from her clothes. Where are we? The man in the suit gave a small smirk. One of your husband's little hideaways. He was always prepared. The detective's eyes narrowed. And you would know that how? The man chuckled. Let's just say. I knew him better than you think. The detective didn't like that answer. But for now, he had bigger problems. They could hear shouts on the other side of the door. Their pursuers were trying to find another way in. We don't have much time, the wife muttered. We need to move. The man in the suit nodded and pulled out the USB drive. Then I think it's time we see what's really on here. The wife hesitated. The detective noticed. You've never seen the files, have you? She pressed her lips together. No. He never told me what was on it. Just that it was the most dangerous thing he'd ever possessed. The man in the suit found an old laptop in one of the crates. Then let's find out. He inserted the drive, and the screen flickered to life. The detective leaned in, scanning the files. Classified government documents. Encrypted messages. Financial records of offshore accounts. And then, one video file. Labeled simply, "The Truth." The wife took a shaky breath. "Play it." The detective clicked. The video began. And the second it did, everything changed. The video that changed everything. The screen showed grainy security footage. A room, plain, cold, clinical. A single chair in the center. A man sat there, his hands tied behind his back, his head slumped forward. He was barely conscious. Then, the door opened. And someone walked in. The wife gasped. Because the man who entered the room, the one who stood over the captive, the one who spoke in a low, commanding voice, was her husband. The detective froze, watching in shock as the millionaire spoke calmly to the prisoner. "You thought you could expose us," the millionaire said. "You thought you could bring us down. But you were wrong." The man in the chair coughed, blood dripping from his lip. "You're making a mistake," he rasped. The millionaire smiled. "No. I'm insuring my future." And then, he nodded. Another man entered the frame. Holding a syringe. The screen glitched as the injection was given. And then, the prisoner stopped moving. Silence. The wife staggered backward, a hand over her mouth. "No. That's not possible." The detective shut the laptop. "This isn't just a cover-up," he muttered. "Your husband wasn't a victim. He was part of it. A target on their backs." Before anyone could react, the ceiling above them rumbled. The pursuers had found another way in. The detective cursed, grabbing the laptop. "We need to get out of here." The wife looked shaken, but she nodded. "There's another exit, through the back." The man in the suit smirked. "Looks like the fun's not over yet." They moved fast, pushing open a hidden hatch at the far end of the room. Just as gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets shredded through the crates, barely missing them as they dropped into another tunnel. The detective barely had time to breathe before he heard the voice of the mercenary leader from above. "Find them." The hunt was far from over. And now, the truth was more dangerous than ever.